Maria, do you want to just check the mic?
Oh, yeah. Testing. 1, 2. 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Ready whenever you are.
Hi everyone. Welcome to the Edinburgh launch of Languishing. I just wanted to start by thanking Lighthouse Books for having us and for doing all the amazing work they do, and especially to Mary and the whole team. And thank you to you all for coming out on probably the first genuinely warm day of the year, in my opinion. By way of introduction, we have two very short bios. Ian Macartney is an Alacrity Libra from Linlithgow.
And Maria is a foolish Gemini from Maple.
I'm glad we got that out of the way and cleared that up. So we've got a kind of tight hour we're going to fill. We're going to do a few poems from the book and have a short discussion and Q&A. Very happy to answer any questions. And then round things off with another poem. And then hopefully get to just hang for a bit. Okay, so I'm going to slip into poem mode.
Am I starting?
I'm starting.
Okay.
Elysium heart murmur. High on glottal hops to lock a curl murmuring. The swan incendiary of spells and tempos. Icing the antibody electric.
Walk poem. Walk 2 hours for the Parliament's pools of glycerin. But hey, Super Edinburgh looks alive tonight, otherwise. Rent countless credits, the glimmering metropole of Arthur's Seat, your illuminated cake. Body that can sustain itself, slush potential, illuminant errand boy, lavender emissary of no confidence. Gothic captive's moon in dissimilar upkeep. On Cowgate, I took out my pewter orb, traced to make the hologram, clump of clover, and Budleigh tide like my curved Cairnc's neck. Ontic cream along, listening, with the platinum grin expected. Ascendant solitude lifting me to the traffic and steam, for I'm also beckoned to follow for lavender.
Art Nouveau. My new mental health is an emerald, dragonfly mating in voracious heart posture.
This Hyper Glasgow Queer Street service for Super Edinburgh Vapour Waverley will hover at Springburn, Rob Royston, Steps, Gard Kosh, Greenfalls, Cumbernauld, Camelon, Camelot, Falkirk Meridian, Polmont, Asphodel, Yggdrasil, Eldorado, Pale Mint, Keir City, Luxglow, Linlithgow, Azsarat, Found City of Z, Infinite Parallax South, Acid Communism, White Noir, quote-unquote Elysium, Pseudo Opal, Nirvana Bra, Teal Phosphor, Kraut Kirkcaldy, Ultra Dundee, Micro Cooper, Abertropolis, Infra Ness, Alater Park, Kavira and Kabola, Panchaea, 12 Stones, Caledonian Antisyzygy, Willow Wisdom's Wisp, Heart of the Har, Piper Epsilon, Aber Amber, Finite Parasite Right, Shabalba, 9 of Wands, New Xanadu, Gajol East, Jana, E. Livingston, Kraken Field, Section 37, Pearly Candor, Neo Shield, Rockabarret, Faron by Air, Zerzura, Ether's Clang, Tir Nanog, Purple Fire, and Super Edinburgh Vapour Waverley.
We this morning were texting about getting to Edinburgh. I think there are some specific works happening, so there's been some diversions. And on page 53 we have a little chat conversation about trying to get to Edinburgh 3 years ago. And I think we recapitulated it, so I just wanted to shout out everyone who has to make that journey regularly. I'm always here for infrastructural discourse. Love Reaper. Tonguing the spiral to stave off dying, solitary, golden, testosterone sundown. I will never leave the Hebrides, nor cast my lot in Applecross, beholden to silence, the elixir of other lives, adjusted for inflation. You're fishing, hopelessly in love with the same black holes. Icy catastrophe in all voyeurs, stealing melody from the endlessness of veil girl allure, pinching Lucia's duplicity, a sapling vision.
The epigraph for this one, Cloud is Octave, comes from an Edinburgh writer, Ross McCleary, who's an excellent performer and writer, and it's refill the Nor Loch, which is what the meadows used to be. There used to be a loch there, and it is his life mission to refill it, which is great. And I thought I'd chat about this. This is a poem about listening to a specific Caroline Polachek 10-minute long remix in the meadows. Cloud is Octave. Maria! Oi! Her 10-minute long platinum tongue swam so much it made our brain attuned to the pivot of steel quicksilvering. That slow a cloud is plural colours following a milk breeze. It was endless, the feeling of endlessness, a short span glitter stained, grape juice dripped, snapping, Mobius stripped, the end of a break. Less forgotten, godly strong reverb with Cumulus's octave. Static not rain, but cosmic backsound to temperate ground. Loops amidst mist, pale grass, patient as the deployment of a miracle. For once, think it familiar, like courses broadened, the estuary of knowledge broken, i.e., something anew, unearthed, aglow. Oh, the meadows lifting crystalline chunks join the sky above. Maybe there's a pewter-lit spaceship beneath soil. Hidden galactic pearl, the bed where there used to be a loch. Real diamonds of the loch being that which reflects our treacle-seeming surface. Sparkles uppity ascendant as steam. Maybe this is a loch. Maybe this is also a loch. Impossible for it.
Serpentine. I wrote this from my friend Scott. Homesick for scent. In a small green stone from Iona, whose provenance is a will to keep breathing. Through the pain involving breathing, I've breath left. There's a hill we circle and smell the gorse. Sweet happiness. I'm not ready to be anyone. Bruising my violet belief in the daily. Don't really want to talk. Still confusing fatigue for being newborn. Barefoot on the hot popping tarmac, a cruel of panic. Should become someone with half a self come. This stone is supposed to stop you from drowning. Don't know if you're ever Aquarius, a lot more querulous in my sleep. Also quite literally, welling up youth. Not throwing up water on the morning again, are you? Let the girl Cupid pierce my ice with a shy smile, counseling itself, chest flaming, cold medicine, peridot sky castles. We built in sleep, collapse, a heart-shaped architecture. Seeing her, gift to my little plaid child, the ragged label of being alone, worrying, Firth of Clyde, from silken memory into eczema. I'm never so close to the water as when sleeping in the back seat of harsh red diner, vinyl in love with one thing. Cross held over the unreleased waiting list for light therapy, their names sewn into the giant Scottish oil painting, bringing me coffee, a whole month sober. Adorable someone once said, if you were an island, you'd be Iona. I'm crying for archipelago purple clip loop. Put a nail through my foot, clouding language in spiral galaxy. All you can see from the mainland, the sky-white lace, last of my 20s, trembling May of the trees. It's only a movie anxiety. Loaned your voice, hum in my sternum, covering the same version, screaming emptiness of cryptids, make a wild dream stop dying. Hot tariff, slow bones, the girl, non-playable, shimmering print on stars, lit honey rose menthol forever. The nausea of multi-story parking lots, thrown off again. The only reason I'm still here is hills. 30 more years of metastasizing capital in the city's arteries, just sucking my bleeding thumb of cherry, super tea, calling the beautiful dog back from anonymous song. I can't trust the accuracy of gossip. It's making me sick. In the same room, you'll never come over the same again. Salary deduction. Wishes are just spiritual shortcuts. I haven't done anything. Smelling the future clover, lost refrain of air quality, scrap fatuous, voice faltering beauty hurts its ghost. Once we were good, driving in white noise. That secret thing I did in the garden, blue gingham, higher than perfect brain embroidery of being green. Goodbye on the doorstep, sorry this isn't happening. Mainly known for my wildlife, can have this necklace and bridal veil, using Byronic data abroad, holding the line. I'm having a real day of you, moderate pollen, Oedipus martini, drunk by the space heater. Baby, you can't die weatherless. In my arms, I'm more old, unbearing a breakdown, ferried to heaven. None of this was growing older. Return to source. Hello, clone high on my lung, melancholia. St. Bridget, I dare you.
This next one's called Republican Botanic Gardens of Super Edinburgh, August 2122, the 12th. I do, in all my work, I kind of end up doing this very obsessive dating. I always like to timestamp something very specific dates, which is essentially a riff on Edwin Morgan's kind of got his, he does that in, what's the sequence called? Sonnets for Glasgow, I think. But here it felt cool to do absurd for these kind of Scottish sci-fi poems to like amplify into centuries into the future. But yeah, this is about botanic gardens. And the epigraph is "Heaven is overhead, snowblight in the summer," which comes from a song called "Degrees of Fruit." No, August is an angel. Is the name of that song. Our diamonds on the shore, window ashore for sun swayed, rainbow capillaries off the gem hanging by a pearly thread, and I could pretend, even in late summer, iced like tea, that this glass was stirred in a glass. Your sentient vodka, and words conversant with the mirror will be called the macrophone, and we will get deserving parts of this crystalline, sertaline, is that how you pronounce that? This evolved succulent, dappled in the light, steel pampas grass in the back garden, an exit unto home, or xeric feathers.
Insert gradient, spring, for Ian. The snowflake buds don't depend on funding. I don't know what to wear out my life, epidermal barrier, stop water loss, being economically dependent, wanting the dead set starlit result. Mint yellow, pink, pink, minting yellow. We don't have to do anything. My phone died of old age and too much rhapsody, just in time for a supercluster of quasi-mystical spots to hatch on the back of my hand. Mutual tragedy of languishing genus, computer melancholia. Friends make promises too soft, mint yellow pink. Lullabies to kill time in lottery chemicals. Composting internet. Our brains the same remnant filtering everywhere. Crazy trees, green goodness smoothie, internet cafe, double canal song, yogurt hallucinogens, anachronous moon soup. What flowers bloom globulars and bird voice? Anesthetized semi-opaque whole eyesores of diamonds. Can't stop being waterfall phenomenology. wearing mineral gorge to your morning workout. The math is all wrong and mine.
So we're not ending, but
Should we
we're.
read it simultaneously? Line after line.
I want to do line after line. So, alongside Languishing Cute, we have a sort of what we're calling a remix or B-side pamphlet, which has remixes of each other's poems. So I've remixed some of Maria's quote unquote, and Maria's and vice versa, as well as some other like offcuts that didn't make it into the final collection. But there was a few in here so that we wrote together, primarily in that branch of Coffee Angel, right by the Edinburgh Botanics, and on a really muggy 4 p.m. So I mean, this seems apt weather to do that in. And so one of them is a sort of sequel to the poem I just last read. So this is Republican Botanic Gardens of Super Edinburgh, August 21st. So it's now 100 years in the future. And the epigraph comes from Bill Gates's son, Rory John Gates. He wrote Diamante, like a kind of very short poem, which is darkens, absence, mysterious, dark. And that really annoyed us in 2023, so we decided to add it into our pamphlet. Do you want me to do it first?
Okay.
Yeah. In the palace of Instagram flowers,
Grammatical Caledonia.
golden botanical lads,
The department clearances.
we kept wandering.
To the closed gate.
The glass house was
Unending. It could hold a city.
even a diorama of that city.
Would be as big as a corpse.
Plant, iron cast,
We were promised jetsam of decades ahead.
and the IPCC erudition,
404 apocalypse.
where a poem by Rory John Gates should be.
Wilting in a cancelled glass house.
Our summer of discontent, canals
Of rubbish down the dry canal.
of the highest street,
Oh roads, I missed you so.
your cobbled grey petals,
Clumped like autumn snow.
however wise the sun turned.
Us on.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
what is this book?
Oh, thank you. What is this?
What is this? Yeah, for those of you that don't know, this came out a few weeks ago with Tapsalteerie, which is a great press based in Aberdeenshire, and that's the context. But yeah, there are some things that we were maybe going to chat about, but at any point feel free to chime in.
I want to give slightly more context. Just
Okay.
ever so slightly. We wrote this in the first draft of this was August 2022, so it's kind of been fermenting / been we've been kind of working on it for a while on and off. But it kind of came out of Maria has written 2 pamphlets before about Lana Del Rey and Grimes, and I really wanted to do a collaborative pamphlet on Caroline Polachek, who's this indie pop star that we really love. And then 2 weeks later, we kind of had a full manuscript, and we'd really gone off on the specific idea of Celtic futurism, which is kind of the term that we kind of latched onto. And then the rest is future history.
Yeah, I feel like we almost had to exile ourselves from the present to get back to what felt like culture and Scottishness in 2022, but also throughout the pamphlet and the book, we like jumped decades and also years. Like I think a lot of it is, there was a term that I forget who said first, but it's in the blurb about retro-adolescence. And I think a lot of like the sci-fi element and projection through pop was about trying to figure out how we could talk about our childhoods and abstracting that, and to think about lost futures and lost utopias as well.
For sure, yeah. I mean, like I feel like the hometown as a space, like that's why there's so much West Lothian and Linlithgow content in this. And I don't know the absurdity, or not the absurdity, but like the juxtaposition of that with like a hyperloop to Shetland, for example. You know, it's like the I don't know, the Scottish mundane with this kind of like speculative trappings or imaginings, then kind of like I don't want to call it a political dimension, but I guess it is exactly that, or utopian, or you know, something.
Well, I think it's also like environmental in the broadest sense of everything that makes up the environment of a place and a time, and how deeply mediated that is. by the political climate, and also how that manifests through culture and discourse, right? And like the way we talk about things. I was gonna ask you how, like, where, other than place names, like what is the West Lothian of it all? Like what, how, or Mid Lothian? Which Lothian is it?
It's West.
It's West. Yeah. Yeah.
The Lothian of it all. Okay.
Because like
Yeah.
thinking about like transitional space, and we were talking about like satellite towns as well.
Sure, yeah, I guess. Right, Scotland is like a Zeno's paradox of a country, right? You can, and there's other, like, this is actually Celtic nations in general, I'd say, like, you can subdivide it, and each place gets more and more territorial with each kind of subdivision, and then you've got villages upon villages that all feel they have an identity. Actually, Ireland probably does this more, really, that's definitely quite prominent there. So there was a sense of, like, revealing that kind of, like, in Scotland, quote-unquote. And also, the other thing that came to mind was something like, there's an excellent producer called Proc Fiscal, who's based in Edinburgh, and I feel like a lot of his titles and kind of work deals with that kind of similar kind of abstraction. And maybe it's something like, there's like a double, well, let me think. Okay, I'm now thinking about like following on the kind of Proc Fiscal line and going on that tangent. I'm feeling like what I was struck by was that in some ways when I started this project, there was some sense of like democratizing to it, in the sense that there's kind of these two niches of work where there's poetry, contemporary poetry, and quite experimental in form, and then there is this very small, this kind of small town in Scotland, which in the sense of the world is kind of unknown, right? Let alone in the UK, as if people in England know what West Lothian is, right? But then, and so I thought, okay, well, we're mixing this with like a kind of digital culture and a digital pop culture. So there's a kind of democratizing to it. But actually what happens is this weird double refraction of obscurity, because not only are you dealing in the obscurity of poetry, but it's also a particularly niche of pop culture, which is like, not everyone knows who Caroline Polachek is. It's kind of like the hidden, latent avant-garde of pop culture. So it's kind of both getting threaded together. That doesn't answer your question, but it felt good to say.
No, I think that's a much more intellectual response than, because I was thinking a lot about like psychic space and how a poem creates psychic space. And I was trying to remember the thing that W.S. Graham says about this, like it's like inner space or something like that, but how, what it means to revisit, you know, for me, I grew up in South Ayrshire, and how to kind of revisit those spaces of almost like exposure, where it's almost like too cringe to go there, or like painful for multiple reasons, but it's partly like to do with landscape, and I almost wanted to like throw a lightning bolt into this, the way that memory kind of worked, and see how it could kind of like set certain things alight to spread to other things, which maybe is the segue into talking about like speed, because some people have commented on how the poems kind of have this quickness to them, or part of it is the time jumping, where it's quite paratactic, you know, it feels like it, there's a lot of listiness maybe, and I'm just curious about speed and like what it means to write in a speedy way, or how the speed connects to ideas of time in the book, and also the fact that we did write it quite quickly, and then there was like a period of lull, and then
we were talking about the speed thing earlier today. It's interesting because I mean, like, because it's a collection of two halves, right? Because it came initially, it was like a Google Doc, and we were just adding to it, and you kind of have the visual artifacts of that in the book. There's screenshots of like the comments threads that we would have at the side of Google Docs and things like that. But it's interesting because for me, it very felt like my half, over the 3 years, I was kind of chipping away at it kind of quite consistently. But for you, it was kind of like the sudden burst and then leaving it for a while and then coming back to another sudden. Well, I don't know how the latter half of the rewriting coming in, if that felt fast for you as well. But but we were talking today about like queer speed and like when you're queer, the stereotype of like walking extremely fast anywhere, headphones on, like, and kind of like the space making of that. You're literally carving out space from slow tourists or whatever, as you're trying to walk on. And maybe in a sense, these poems have like that queer speed to them. Something of motor, I don't know, yeah, like something of, because so much of it dealing with, what would you call it, like public transit, right? And in kind of like hyper public transport, like if a train could go at 300 miles per hour in Scotland, so there's a speed to that as well.
It would still be delayed.
It would still be delayed.
But like I think there's something like Lauren Bellant has this idea of like glitch for structures and thinking about how, especially this moment in 2022, where I feel like a lot of, let's just say, systems were very slowly rebooting after COVID or after the particular lockdowns of COVID, and I think there's like this sort of feeling of like flooding back that is also at odds with our own energies and like all of the things that are still real material struggles, but also this idea of like, what would it mean to like flood into a new future, right? This is sort of, I don't know, portal that opens at different times. And yeah, I was thinking about like, in a way, it's like speculative infrastructure, yeah, like what would it actually mean to have this kind of jumping around? But I think the poems aren't smooth, and they actually still maintain that kind of sense of breakage or swerve, and so maybe for me they're like less about mechanical speed and more about like dream speed or something, like the way that, yeah, you're constantly reassembling scenes through them.
Yeah, what you're saying about them not being smooth reminds me of it. It's very lapidary, I guess, right? Like it was very like so much about gems and like jewels and stuff like that, and like the metals of it. And this is kind of like Richard Price, kind of when he was giving very nice words for the back of the book, he kind of brought up on this, like, you know, for all the talk of digital culture, and it's kind of very peppy, winking kind of memery. It's also like has that kind of like quite, it is rooted in that kind of geological stuff, which is kind of like, Scotland has that in abundance, I guess. But it reminds me that, you know, I feel like in the first half, you know, because we talked about, we were thinking about doing the collection, like what's it called when it's like you can flip it and there's the other side, and the idea of that being kind of, so it's not like side one and side two, it's side one and side A. So it's like so we have some kind of horizontal equality, for lack of a better term. But then we really liked Maria's coming first and then mine coming after, because it felt like in your poems they kind of tap into the subject matter and the topics and the inspirations, almost like you're creating a speculative periodic table. You're making the speculative metals and this very chemical fusion, and then I'm kind of building cities with them. I'm kind of building these imaginary cities, like returning again to like super Edinburgh and ultra Dundee, and it's kind of like, I like that kind of trajectory.
Yeah, and there's something about the internet there, right? Partly just how, well, partly like the thing about geological time and you know, things like the internet built on rare earth minerals. But also I was thinking about, yeah, like the lapidary elements and how there's almost like a pharmacology to it. Like, you know, you mentioned sexual in your poem, but there's almost this kind of like, how do we find these like little technologies of euphoria, or like, not symbols, but almost like activating objects that would like produce a different affect or something. Like the poems like crave that contact. But then I also think that is quite interesting in the idea of you building up a kind of array, and you know, the idea of speed again, where it's like who builds the architecture, and I'm incapable of imagining the actual, you know, flourishing to the extent that you are, but I can kind of give some materials. And I think that's actually quite a strong dynamic of collaboration, right? And also the idea of, you know, future imaginary. Maybe before we open to audience, I was going to bring up the figure of the girl, because you mentioned that this in a way serves as the closure of a kind of accidental trilogy that I was sort of working on with these sort of, pop stars. But I was curious because part of it is maybe thinking through the girl as this figure that is, insofar as it's gendered, is always a construction. But also I was kind of thinking today again about, you know, the collective like Tikkun and their work on like the young girl and the connection of this figure of the young girl to capital, and, you know, can that be separated? And so I was like, to what extent do these poems sort of employ an avatar of, like, let's say this kind of high femme, supercharged pop star energy, to like re-territorialize that desire? Like, to what extent does it think beyond the kind of capital desire, and like how does that kind of utopian impulse play into it? And like what was it like for you to inhabit that kind of avatar?
Yeah, right. What can I say about girlhood as a cis man? Well, I get. Well, you know what? Actually, on that point, I mean, there is interesting. I think some of the poems, especially there's one in there called "Future Bathgate Apocalypse Warehouse," which is inspired. It's kind of direct ekphrasis almost of a music video by Caroline Polchak called "Bunny is a Rider," where she's kind of doing Tomb Raider style shenanigans in like what looks like an abandoned Amazon warehouse. And I really wanted to take almost like the voice of the Stan, like the gay Stan Twitter account, the kind of like, you know, like as a poetic eye, and having that and then like running through. So it's like, look at her go, and it's like 6 exclamation marks. So and you know that's an interesting, like, you know, the idea of like cis gay men and like how their relationship to kind of these like women pop stars and things like that. I guess, you know, that's maybe an example of like maybe where I was playing with that. I guess the other side as well is like, and it's again kind of on the blurb, kind of riffing off the blurb somewhat, but you know, so much of Scottish literature is rooted in speculation in the terms of sci-fi and fantasy. You know, Alasdair Gray, you know, Lanark is a sci-fi novel, ostensibly. Edwin Morgan dealt with it a lot as well. But you know that's quite a male history. So I think we like the idea of like in the same way that Sophie, you know, the hyperpop musician, kind of still did that kind of sci-fi work. It probably, I wouldn't say it was necessarily brought the Scottishness to the front, probably in quite a pointed way, but at the same time it's like melted goopy and metal, right? Goopy and what am I saying? Gloopy, not goopy. Gloopy, and like more feminine, right?
Right, and I always think like the
Trans feminine
prefix, yeah, and like all the different affordances of trans as a prefix and hyper as a prefix, and hyper being like, you know, thinking about like betweenness, but hyper being specifically about like above or beyond, or like over, and how it almost implies this instability, but also like a kind of impulse to keep trying something. And I was thinking about like when you were talking there about like the history of masculine Scottish authorship and how some of these books will end with this kind of, I don't know, something like a figure of like pregnancy as the rebirth of a nation. And I was like, what kinds of reproduction beyond that, or aside from that, or kind of adjacent or different, what would like the queer proliferation be, like the hyper of it all, and like that being something that's like distributed differently. It might not be linear, it might have that kind of like less climactic sense of, I'm almost using sonic metaphors here because it seems easier than narrative ones, but yeah, I was thinking something about that, and like again it's almost like by revisiting forms of girlhood at different life stages or something, and the cultural touchstones of that, it was almost like trying to find the materials for like rebuilding ideas of like what is Celtic sci-fi, like what is the substrate of that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good moment to see if anyone in the audience has a question or anything they want to share. Yeah, Tom.
I'd be curious for you to kind of expand on your idea of lost features. What does it mean to either of you, and what does it mean for the collection?
I guess for me, a lot of that comes from kind of the almost simple impulse of like the absurdity of a Scottish utopia, almost in that sense. It's not. Yeah, I don't know. No. I'm not necessarily. I'm probably maybe the less cynical one of us two, but then again, maybe I'm also actually just a
He's
bit
younger.
yeah, that's what it comes down to. But you know, the idea, there's like a humor in the idea that we will ever get a subway system that will get us from Glasgow to Shetland, right? Like, and that's funny, and like that felt compelling. And I think yeah, maybe we didn't really touch on this, but like playfulness, right? I mean, like, which is playful always gets. A lot of my writing gets described as playful, and I don't think that's wrong, but I think it's like, I wouldn't say that's the same as whimsical, right? I think there's something like exploratory about playfulness. So I guess for me, the idea of lost futures is almost like being in the playground of a future that probably won't be / won't be, and finding that enjoyable, and finding that rewarding, and finding something new, hopefully, from out of that. So that's my answer, I think.
Yeah, and to take it to a place of Mark Fisher briefly, or like the idea of like his idea of kind of lost futures in the context of capitalist realism, and you know, what is it to grow up not really having no politician or movie is offering any particularly positive vision of the future, right? It's all apocalypse or whatever. Yeah, we know what, you know, it's apocalypse or politics, basically the same thing. So what does it mean to kind of grow up in that and how to, again, like think beyond it? And I think that melancholia is an affect that comes up a lot in my work and in this book, and part of that experience, right, is the idea of you don't even know what the object you've lost is anymore. Like, it's different from mourning, where you have a thing to grieve, and maybe there's like a timeline to that grief or stages to it. But part of that experience of melancholia or depression is like this kind of foreclosing or stasis, where it's hard to think outside 5 minutes. And then so how can poetry like widen that aperture of 5 minutes? Like bringing in the playful and absurd, let's just throw this poem into 2222. Genuinely, what would it be like to inhabit that for a bit? And I don't have the, I don't know, like dream calories to write a sci-fi novel. Like, I genuinely could not imagine that much detail. So there's something about spending like a brief minute in that time, and like, what would that glimpse be? Like a shimmer of the future. And those kind of shimmers is a kind of, yeah, like, what if we could kind of get like a slight, like a kind of, what's the word where you have to like build up immunity to something gradually? It's like if you can just have like a homeopathic dose of hope, or we're talking about magical thinking, what would that do? Not necessarily politically, that would be great, but that's a bit grandiose to claim, but like to just get you to a place of being able to think outside of that 5 minutes.
Maybe your half is melancholy and mine is anxious. That's probably
Yeah.
probably the way they both work.
The dialectic. Think you have time for a couple more? Jane?
Thank you, I enjoyed that very much. And I was thinking about Lois's Scotland,
Yeah.
things like that. And then I thought, we're all in this kind of amnesiac state, particularly after COVID. So while you were emphasising 2022, I thought, I'll remind myself what happened in 2022. Well, it was the Jubilee. Scotland has refused a referendum, so on and so forth. And since then, you know, Scottish politics has imploded around the trans issue. Basically, it's become the kind of focal point to talk about the trans issue rather than the disintegration of Scottish independence with the Union. And I wondered how conscious you were of those, you know, because you must have been in 2022 living through those disappointments due to the Jubilee which represented.
For sure.
And does any of that discourse overtly get into your poems? Because I see it as a wonderful counter
Yeah.
to those kind of hard calls in the political sphere, and then of course we've had Sturgeon scandal and everything since then.
I mean, I'll just speak quickly. Yeah, I mean, I think we were writing to it consciously, but almost like in spite of it. I think what you're saying about counter is like probably the word.
Like counterfactual.
Yeah, right. Being like, oh god, that's so awful. Let's go back to our sci-fi poems. Not quite maybe as escapist as that, but like, you know.
Well, it's also like changing the frame of
Yeah.
reference, right? Like, because it's sort of like, how do you avoid the trap of just responding in the terms in which these things are set up? They set you up to fail, right? They're set up to foreclose thinking. So how can you, again, it's like proliferation as opposed to opposition, or, well, that's not quite right. Not opposition, but like proliferation as opposed to like binary thinking, in its most like reductive and harmful Yeah.
I'll also say Momus is a great influence of mine, and I love a lot of his work. So that's actually kind of another thread I hadn't thought about before. So yeah, thanks for that.
Maybe one more question?
Yeah, Megan.
I was really interested in like what you were talking about with like podcasts that we grew up in the same
Yeah,
town.
yeah.
And like Lithgow is such an interesting example of that because I feel like your childhood hometown is kind of a liminal space anyway, because you're not kind of aware of the world in the same way when you're a child. And I think Lithgow is a great example of that because like no one can ever tell where I'm from with my accent. But I have to tell them I'm like this kind of world. And it's like some people have a really strong accent here and some people have this really almost English, like American all the time. It's really weird. I feel like one of those sets of kind of like, I don't know, there's like ways where cultures are watered down in like Scottish culture and down in like the kind of English in a way.
Yeah.
It's the whole concept of wondering like how much that fed into like the type system, like even just like future stuff.
Sure, yeah, thank you. I mean, yeah, Linlithgow is also because it's so close to Edinburgh, right? So there's already commuter town and it's kind of a satellite mention of that. And I mean, the political context as well is, I mean, West Lothian is a post-industrial space. The shale things is probably its most defining natural feature, which were made from shale mining, and it really was a world centre for that until 1980s and Thatcherism. So it's an area of a lot of great, profound deprivation, except for Linlithgow, which because of its proximity to Edinburgh, and it's like right between Glasgow and Edinburgh as well, right? So again, kind of like straddling the intermediate sense. I guess writing, let me think, yeah, writing into Linlithgow, part of it is almost like so I was living in Linlithgow at the time while working the job in Edinburgh that I was. And so I think that fed into it a lot, right? I was like, and also, actually what you're saying is really pertinent because it was returning as an adult after being in different places. I was in London actually right before, so it was like real profound boomerang back, right? And I guess again also like kind of back to that sort of like playful absurdity of it as well, like what does it mean to raise Linlithgow in this kind of mythopoetic way is kind of like funny because it is kind of like a name that people pass on the train as well, which I think then fed into that like train list poem as well, yeah. But I mean, Maria, I mean in terms of, you kind of touched on it with Ayrshire and Mabel, I don't know if there's like parallel experiences you have to that.
It's funny now I think of it. I don't think I do with Mabel what you do with Linlithgow, in that it's not so explicit. I'm not sure, but there are like oblique, Ayrshire experiences. But it's I guess it's sort of like almost like the reverse where I moved to Mabel when I was 3. Both my parents are English, and there aren't many English people in Ayrshire. So it's like you very much, it's like strange because I feel like I'm never belonging to one thing or the other. And I think that kind of feeling of discomfort with belonging is like definitely why poetry is the medium for me, because it kind of allows for that. And also the multiplicity of registers that come through with voice. But I think like the post-industrial element for sure, and just that feeling of what does it mean to grow up in a place where there is no future, the school does not offer you a future. It's very, high rates of all of the things that people used to deal with that fact, that is structural. And I think that's kind of part of it, but then also remembering all these like little things we did to create some kind of joy or collectivity. And there's a lot of frictions in that too. But I'm really interested in like how a lot of, I guess, Scottish adolescence is not often depicted in its real, let's face, like like that, and actually, especially in poetry, I just feel like that isn't separate from the hypermediated world of pop, and I don't know, I was kind of interested in those things together somehow. Yeah. And also just like hyper is quite a childish state of mind, and actually that's something that a lot of places will try to squash out of you, and it's an energy that I like to try and find again and again and again through poetry, which is sort of like a weird romanticism, I guess. A different idea of childhood, a sort of blue smarty version. What do you think? Should we wrap up with a poem?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do now is we're going to read one of each other's poems. So Maria's going to read one of mine, and I'm going to read one of yours. Do you want to start? Or do you want?
Sure. Give me an hour and I'll give you your dream. I'm wanted to say I feel you to the man languishing cute on the train floor by its pursed lips. Drunk melancholy but I was listening to my album. Silent, I took out the parrel in my ear so it could stop, so I could hesitate. His wife was slumped asleep on a chair, paired with empty chair. Unresolved argument, infinite in sleep. Our night went pulsing, comforting mouths super mute because of my sonic insolence. Charging, case clutched like a capsule of mince, cat's eyes for the path of my gravitating shells that dictate zoetic balance, departures, which sense the weight of tomorrow. Before I leave, always, the moving channel of light. Haymarket to Linlithgow, August 2022, the 5th.
I was going to do Language of Gems, but actually at the talk about hometown at the end makes me just want to do your poem 613, which really gets to all of it, because I think it is...
That is my most air poem.
That, and also I just think it's phenomenal, Maria. But, also, not connected to that, it has an epigraph of me, which is Scream Love into the Sea 613 times, and that's from my poem Haiku Burger, from my first ever pamphlet done by the press Maria co-runs, femme. Ian. It makes me think of how when we were teenagers we get drunk on the abandoned golf course and sometimes scream into the dark our cold, how cold we were, hiding in sandy bunkers to shelter from wind. I think we drank so much in those days just to warm our bones, which seemed malfunctioning, like shouldn't our youth itself generate endless heat? I love the paradox of a clandestine bottle of cider the size of one's own torso, the perfect symmetry of salt air and socialized crying, the cold fizzy sweet juice we drink and puke. We called it whiteying, and it was a sport. Who'd whitey first? It was so cold though. One day someone overdosed and ran topless into a graveyard. In the middle of that winter, the river Aire froze over. The ice was there for weeks. I miss the ice, but also I hate it. Anytime I have a memory like this, I think of that Lost Campesino song, The Sea is a Good Place to Think About the Future. Its lullaby of beginning guitar, the angst of a leg wound and violin. It's so cold. I'd beg jackets from my friends, they'd shove beanies on me and I'd kick off my shoes. We listened to bands like There Will Be Fireworks, Twin Atlantic, and We Were Promised Jetpacks. Nobody believed a word I said. They put me on their shoulders. I was that light. We boosted from the Polis all down the shore and I hid in the dunes, kiss kiss, the crazy golf course. I wanted someone to tell me what to do, like there could be imperatives up there in the clouds or down in the mown grass weeping. Dad drove me home and didn't comment on the smell of vodka. I screamed love into the sea for everyone I hurt and who hurt me. Still hear the tinkle of ice cubes when I go to sleep. Dream of toothache anesthetics and swilling the leftovers of adults and bowling clubs. My mum used to date a professional pirate who made visualizers for club nights and punted deals for mobile phone companies. When he played piano, I thought he was her. I heard his alarm go off in the dark. We drove him to London and I wouldn't let anyone open the window. I was so cold. It was late summer and I shivered to the bone. There are 613 parts to the human body, 613 parts to each of the divine mitzvot in the Torah. The angel number 613 means be good, be courageous and go after your dreams and love your failures. Eat spaghetti bowls of strawberry laces, drink venoms, vomit, learn to love your molecules. The future getting rid of us. Never trust a musician with your heart. 613 means that time brings better results. What is it I really want to do? When I saw the white kids rioting at Woodstock 99 on Netflix, I went to bed feeling sick like from years of bad Januaries and footage of America at war. In media res, the world's big motherfucking bleeding knee. Everyone knowing too much of nothing. Misspelling the endless talent of my tulpa, which OG came from the sea. Might delete her? Except my dance troupe debuted on the earth plane that day, and in the Mobius strip of those limbs I knew I'd always be a light worker, intuiting grief and devotion from the many-sunned overmind, like an HD. This thing hurts like hell. All you can hear. Warmly, Maria. Thank you very much, guys.
Excellent. Before I go, just a quick shout out to 2 events that are happening this week. One is in Edinburgh at the Embassy Gallery at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday. We have a reading with poets from Canada and Copenhagen, Stephen Zoltansky and Michael Nardoni, and I will also read. And then on Sunday, if you can come to Glasgow, we have Peter Gizzi, winner of the T.S. Eliot Prize, in town, and he'll be reading with Sam Radelosa, who's right here, and some other poets, so please consider coming along to that. It's at the Doublet at 6:30 p.m. Thank you so much to Lighthouse
Yes,
and
thank you.
Tapsalteerie.